I'm Julie Barkey with this Senate update. The current system used by most Minnesota schools in the event of teacher layoffs is the last in, first out rule, also known as LIFO. Two bills heard Thursday in the Senate Education Committee would change that structure and require teacher performance to be used as a key component when deciding which teachers might be laid off. The bills are carried by Senator Terri Bonoff and Senator Eric Pratt. Here is some testimony from each of those measures.
There has been much written in the last several weeks about the bill that I'm here to present. Senate File 97 proposes to alter a process that has been long-standing and highly controversial. This bill proposes to use teacher performance as the lead criteria when making teacher retention decisions. This issue has been discussed and debated for many years in the state of Minnesota. We are an outlier as one of only 10 states that continue to have the policy of basing teacher retention solely on the factors of service. Some of you might recall President Obama coming to our state in 2011 when he invited the former Teacher of the Year, Lisa Brusca, to join him. She had been let go immediately after receiving her Teacher of the Year award. That stood out to me as a particularly poignant time where Minnesota had been singled out for having what I consider a backwards education policy. There's actually, in your packets, there's the Kara Levin story about that particular incident. What you might not know is that 25 years before, in 1991, the same thing happened to Kathy Nelson, a Teacher of the Year recipient who was fired by Fridley because she didn't have as many years in the school as the 4 other social studies teachers. That article was in the New York Times, and it too is in your packets. Keep in mind that Kathy had been there for 13 years. So these were not young people fresh out of school. They were experienced and proven teachers who were effective and had the awards to prove it. They just happened to be hired after their counterparts. Their stories highlight the pervasive nature of this outdated policy. This proposal is not about valuing young people over old people. It is about keeping the very best and most effective teachers in the classroom, and more than anything else, it's about serving our students to our best ability. I believe this issue represents an important civil right. In fact, it became a central piece in a lawsuit settled in the California courts when a group sued the state claiming that this exact policy was unconstitutional. They won. The courts ruled that low-income students were put at a disadvantage because often those students were placed with a disproportionately high number of low-performing teachers and therefore hurting their ability to be academically successful. We have heard clearly that if we don't act this session, there will be a similar court case in Minnesota. We have an opportunity to address this issue with a legislative vote this session and not a legal challenge. I implore us to take that action. This past Saturday, I spent a good part of the day watching the events in Selma, Alabama. I was enthralled with the significance of the day. I listened intently to President Obama and was very inspired. President Obama did not only speak of racial inequity and triumph, but he talked of the spirit of Americans overcoming inequity and experiencing triumph. Please allow me to just quote a few passages from his remarks. What greater expression of faith in the American experiment than this, than the belief that America is not yet finished, that we are strong enough to be self-critical, that each successive generation can look upon our imperfections and decide that it is in our power to remake this nation to more closely align with our highest ideals. And then he went on to say, loving this country requires more than singing its praises or avoiding uncomfortable truths. It requires the occasional disruption, the willingness to speak out for what's right and to shake up the status quo. We can do this, members. I'm not equating this issue to the severity of the problems addressed by our nation 50 years ago, but the words are still relevant. Often you hear people talk about our current achievement gap is one of the civil rights issues of our time. Because we are failing a generation of young people, This failure is our failure, our collective community failure. It is not the school's failure, and it certainly is not teachers' failure. We must put a stop to this and use every available tool to address this systemic challenge. Leaving a teacher layoff structure in place that does not demand the highest performing teachers be placed in our classrooms is akin to neglect. What rationale could possibly be used to say seniority is more important than teacher performance? We say we want a diverse teacher population in our classrooms, yet our very policies pink slip our newly recruited teachers of color. We know there has been a technological revolution that allows us to address each and every unique student in uniquely effective ways, and yet our policies have the potential to wipe out the technologically adept teachers from having the opportunity to transform their building culture. I have quoted our president in my remarks today. Our president and Secretary Duncan have been on record for championing policies that place teacher performance as the first criteria for hiring, firing, and retention decisions. Recently, Illinois passed their own version of this that they called the Performance Evaluation Reform Act. And Secretary Duncan remarked, Illinois has created a powerful framework to strengthen the teaching profession and advance student learning. I am joined today by a few who will be the voice of the many in advocating for this change. I say the voice of the many because poll after poll has shown that the public is way ahead of Minnesota policymakers. The public is demanding this change and are widely in support of it. Recently, I spoke to a group of 100 students from Holy Angels, and I said, how many of you believe that if there's a teacher layoff, that we should do that using seniority as the measure? There was not one hand raised. And then I thought, well, maybe they're just being polite. So I said, okay, how many of you think, sometimes kids don't want to talk. So then I said, how many of you think if there's a teacher layoff, performance should be the criteria? And every hand in that room went up. Let us lead and honor the teaching profession by placing our faith in educators' ability to keep our best teachers, and let us provide them with the financial and policy resources to maximize our students' chance for a lifetime of success. I believe we owe our students that. So finally, with regard to the amendment, I've heard from districts that in order for the first cycle of teacher evaluation to be complete before this policy is in effect, we needed to move the effective date. So that is in the amendment. In addition, I learned that the bill was not clear in terms of including probationary teachers in the performance first category, as their layoffs occur in a different section of law and timing period entitled Notice of Termination. So it really is a technical change just to make sure that the intention of the bill is clear. We included that Notice of Termination language within the original bill. Lastly, the right to appeal language was deleted so that there was no confusion. Tenured teachers have a right to appeal, but because we're making sure that probationary teachers are included, we did not want it to look like now probationary teachers have additional appeals rights, and so therefore it wasn't necessary to keep that provision within the bill. Before moving to our testifiers, I just would like to address some of the criticisms that I have heard. I have heard that we shouldn't focus on layoffs because they really don't happen very much anymore, and that the problem has been overstated. In 2008 and 2009, there were 667 layoffs. 2009 and 10, 601. 2010, 11, 574. 2012 and 2013, 350. And these layoffs are the unrequested leave layoffs. They're not the pink slip type. So those numbers are understated. We hear, is this really fair when our students are bringing so many challenges into the classroom? Poverty, homelessness, not having enough food. All of these things are valid, members, and nobody is suggesting that a teacher is the one who has to bear the brunt of all these challenges. Yet I would assert that with these challenges, it's more important than ever to have the very best teacher in the classroom. I hear this will create an atmosphere and a culture of competition and limit collaboration. Well, I completely reject that notion because I believe in teachers. I believe that we are all meant to be mentors and to teach, that that's human nature, and that our teachers are in their jobs because of their passionate interest in making a difference for children, and that will continue. Some have said and quoted a company in my district, Cargill, as having moved away from performance evaluations. I spoke to the Human Affairs Director, Government Affairs Director this morning to clarify, and in fact that is not true. They do not rate their employees, but they certainly do evaluations, and in a layoff situation would use talent, skill, and ability, as well as strategic mission when making those determinations. So finally, in 2012, this legislation was passed and the governor vetoed it. The governor vetoed it because he said that we needed to have a strong teacher evaluation system in place before we act on this. Well, we have that teacher evaluation system in place, and most importantly, it was designed by teachers, and the districts negotiated how to implement that teacher evaluation policy with their administration. So what this bill does is it does put the power back into the hands of the local districts and the teachers, because it says use your tool, use your locally negotiated teacher evaluation tool to determine who are your best performers and make sure they stay in the classroom in the case of a layoff situation. Finally, the issue around will administrators abuse this and let go the most expensive teachers, and they better not. And what we've done in the bill is we've put a provision in there that says you may not use remuneration as the basis for that, and we really hope that that strong signal gets to the administration that if in fact that happens, then our teachers certainly have the right to appeal, and I'd be standing right there with them. Again, though, as somebody who used to manage large amounts of people, I can't imagine letting my highest paid, highly effective people go rather than those who weren't contributing to the organization.
Can you do all you can to make sure we don't lose our best teachers because they're young and younger or newer, that they're as enthusiastic as they are, as hardworking as they are, high capacity as they are? Nothing can keep them in our district because of the current laws.
In conclusion, members, I know you'll also be hearing Senator Pratt's bill, and many weren't here for my opening remarks, but I would just say that this policy is not a partisan policy. This policy is about coming together, finding a way to move Minnesota forward with regard to using every available tool to make sure the very best teacher is in our classrooms. This is not about getting rid of teachers. This is about having the very best teachers in front of our students. So I know this bill will just be laid over today, and I'm hopeful that by the end of session, we'll find a way to enact this policy.
A bill that removes barriers in our current statutes that make it difficult to keep quality teachers in the classroom. Though the press and others characterize the bill as an anti-tenure bill, in truth, the objectives are much broader. House File 2 should get bipartisan support. This committee has already looked at many of the provisions, and so I'll be brief on them, but the first part of the bill is very similar to Senate File 559 that Senator Clausen presented last night. Just a couple of quick points on it. We removed the composite score from the qualifying ATT, only to look at the component scores. It reforms and improves the process for approving and hiring experienced teachers without a state licensure. It prohibits the Board of Teaching from issuing or renewing a license to anyone convicted of a heinous crime involving a child. And it requires the Board of Teaching to approve and reject a candidate who is applying by submitting a portfolio within 90 days, and also to advise them how to revise that portfolio going forward. Additionally, the bill updates the laws that allowed school districts and charters to hire community experts. House File 2 does not allow a community expert to replace or avoid hiring a licensed teacher. And it also has provisions that require school districts to notify parents when their child is being placed with a community expert. These changes simply make it easier for a school to hire a community expert and to fill a role where they would otherwise have difficulty finding a fully licensed teacher. We also see these options as being used primarily in the foreign language arena and where it's difficult to find fluent speakers. These two provisions address a need that I've heard that out-of-state and some metro districts are having a hard time finding teachers, especially in specialized areas. I'm also particularly supportive of the changes to streamline the out-of-state licensure for out-of-state educators. When my family moved to Minnesota, my mom started to apply for teaching jobs with 14 years of experience and had been teaching in 4 different states. What a shame if she would not have been allowed, if she had to follow the process that we have in place today. She may have been frustrated and left the profession to find something else under these rules. Instead, she found a position in Shakopee and taught 6th grade for 25 years. She influenced the lives of hundreds of students and is often cited as their favorite teacher. And in spite of being elected to the Senate, many in Shakopee still call me Mrs. Pratt's son. The next provision is very similar to Senator Kent's bill that we'll be hearing, Senate File 1554, that provides that a student should not be placed with a teacher who's on a performance improvement plan for 2 years in a row. And finally, very similar to what Senator Bonoff just talked about, the bill reforms the unrequested leave of absence statutes. It requires school districts and local teaching bargaining units to negotiate a plan when a district has to furlough staff due to discontinuance of position, lack of students, financial limitations, or the merger of classes caused by consolidation of districts. The plan must consider and use the subject matter licensure fields, most recent evaluation outcomes, and the key, other locally determined criteria such as teacher seniority.
Now, those of us who support these kind of bills, I'm a Democrat, are often told that we're anti-labor, but I'm telling you, as someone who organized on behalf of a union and open shop, I think this policy is a disaster for labor as well, because young teachers get the message very early on that their work is not valued, only their date of hire. And I think in the long term, it is really, really bad for labor. Now, I'm a long-time DFLer, I'm a former union member, and I just think this is not the way to go. But wait, it gets worse. But the public knows this is a bad policy. The polling shows anywhere between 80 and 90% of the voters want layoffs to be based on more than the date of hire.
DQ and District 196 have invested a significant amount of time in developing our teacher development and evaluation plan, as well as our Q-Comp plan. They both work from a growth mindset. Our plan does not include ranking our teachers based on their summative evaluation. It was a conscious choice we made together. Rewriting this plan to provide for high-stakes rankings would waste time and taxpayer money that could be better spent on things that will improve educational outcomes for children. I'm also concerned about this mandate because without past regular evaluations of all teachers, it's virtually impossible to write fair performance considerations into layoff language. Most of the state is in its first year of implementing their teacher development and evaluation plans. In my district, we are just starting to train our administrators on how to evaluate. Our plan is definitely not fully functional. According to our plan, only a third of our non-probationary teachers will have a summative evaluation each year. How do we write language to use performance standards if 2/3 of our teachers have not been evaluated yet? What if a teacher has a weak evaluation one year, but shows great improvement the next year, but has not had another summative evaluation? In a large district such as ours, how can we equitably compare the evaluations of 2 different history teachers in 2 different high schools being observed and evaluated by 2 different administrators? These are the challenges we face and have talked about when trying to write language based on performance factors.
In our hallway, there's 6 teachers. One of them is a new teacher. She has been very reflective in wanting to get better, and as a first-year teacher, she's needed she's needed help to get better, and she's been very, very, very receptive to and asking, and we've been very supportive in helping her grow and be from being a pre-service teacher now to a novice teacher, and hopefully into soon a great teacher, and that her skills will match her enthusiasm soon. But quite honestly, in conversations about this bill with the people in my hallway that have been trying to nurture her and support her, and I'm not speaking for myself, but I literally have people's comments is, why would I help people if it potentially puts my job on the line?
I heard people say, well, the teacher evaluation system is fully implemented. Strong teacher evaluation system is in place. How can you have a strong teacher evaluation system when school districts, less than half of the school districts, only about 50-some school districts are getting $260 more per pupil than all of the rest of the schools across the state? Senator Dames, you and I should be mad as hell that our districts are being shortchanged. How can we participate in the same kind of programs, mentoring or hiring substitutes, or all of the things that is needed for helping these young teachers that come out of schools? So I'm very upset that the organizations that are supposed to represent all the districts don't come out stronger in favor of the type of equal treatment among all the school districts that they should. And it's not just the teacher evaluation, $260. It's also large districts here in the metropolitan area are spending over $5 per square foot for facilities. And all the rest of the districts, the smaller districts, are spending a little over $2 per square foot. And if you don't have the facilities, you don't have equity in our education system either.
So what I have learned in the last 8 years is that Minnesota really does not have a system in place to provide the support and the induction that is necessary and that research clearly articulates need to be in place for new teachers for at least 3 years. We don't have that in place. We never talk about what is that we have in place today to support the newest teachers who deal with the most challenging circumstances today. We have issues going on in urban settings and in rural settings. Very different challenges, but we have challenges. We have not talked about the cost and the opportunity that we have to invest in that. Then we really have not talked about what this evaluation system does. Because what it does is that it really provides us with an opportunity to say, okay, where are things working and where are things not working? So that we really have to figure out a process to address those issues that are not working for teachers, right? The cost associated with an induction system that truly supports teachers so that they can stay in the classroom and truly does evaluation of teachers is about $250 million. And I can tell you exactly how it works. The Bush Foundation invested $30 million trying to figure out for 6 years how this will work. So we know the cost of it. It's about $250 million. So Senator Pratt and Senator Bonoff, my question to you is, knowing that teachers, principals, districts, professionals, experts know that what we need is an induction system, a training system, a support system, an evaluation system. Please tell me where seniority fits.
I had a town meeting in New Prague this last Saturday, and I had a teacher show up, a 15-year teacher, and you know what? He's never been involved in politics. He felt he had to come to this town meeting, and when he spoke, he was shaking because he'd watched 6 hours of testimony at the House floor, and everyone stood up. I really like the teachers we have in our community, but, and then they ripped the profession to shred. And as a teacher for 31 years, I feel that we have been under attack, that we have been under siege for years. And we are going to have a teacher shortage. I think of those small communities, and I taught in one, a town of 600 for 9 years, that people go there with a little bit of security regarding tenure. In fact, that they put up their stakes there, they build their families there, they're involved in so many, and they're some of the most respected people in those communities. But you know what? Don't tell me that me at $68,000 a year or that new guy at $34,000 a year with the kind of budget decisions that we're faced, I'm sorry, your performance was just 1 point worse than that other guy. Thanks for your service. And you know what? Me at $68,000, I can't get another job. There's no way that someone's going to pay me. Sorry, the best we can give you is 6 years experience. That's what we have. That's what we've been doing for years. There's a little bit about this profession that pays so little to start, but you build on and say, I can actually have a family. I can maybe send my kids to school because I put my time in. And you know what? We should get rid of bad teachers. As a member rights person, dozens of teachers have found their way out the door with the help of administrators and the unions themselves. I never want to defend a bad teacher. But I want you to say, our profession is under attack, and this is one more bill. That's what I'm telling you the teachers are telling me in my community. That's what people are telling me across Senate District 20, that why are we under attack?
Senate File 97 actually expands local control. It doesn't limit local control. The entire reason that we're having the conversation around Senate File 97 is because of existing statute, existing state mandates. On 122A 40 and 41 lay out a whole plethora of constructions around labor law and what the state, forces districts to do and the manner in which they deal with due process and all of these sorts of things. And then as it relates to the unrequested leave process, as every member knows, there's a default position in favor of seniority that means that no district has the ability to negotiate the issue, which is the fundamental sort of issue around local control. So the reason this kind of approach, the reason back in 2011 House File 945 was constructed in the way that it was specifically to address the current state mandates with regard to labor under the continuing contract law and the Tenure Act. So not only that, but the underlying framework for Senate File 97 is itself locally developed in many situations. So the teacher evaluation framework for the districts who didn't use the model are using an underlying system that was also locally developed. So this is a bill that supports local control if you're concerned about that. I suspect that's not really the real sort of issue that's at play here.